What is up and welcome back. We are your Colorado real estate family. In this video right here, what we're going to be doing is covering the things that we do not like about Aurora, Colorado.
All right, the first thing that we're going to be talking about is proximity. So we're going to take it to a bunch of different things, but the first one being Denver. So this is about 30 minutes from like the heart of downtown Denver. It's going to be like if you're trying to get over to the foothills, let's take say Golden as a city, for example. It's going to be about 34 minutes from Aurora to Golden, which is going to be kind of those foothill cities. And then also if you want to get up to the mountains and you want to go to some of the ski resorts, the closest probably being to Loveland Ski Resort, it's going to be about an hour and 14 minutes. So it's not actually that convenient when trying to get over to the west side of town or even say downtown Denver.
And let's be real, guys, if you guys are going on that ski trip, it is going to take you so much longer in the height of the season than an hour, what'd you say, hour and 14 minutes.
Oh yeah.
You're probably looking at closer to 2.5 to 3 hours to get up there once you do hit that ski traffic. So Aurora, because it is so far east, it's a little hard to get up into those ski resorts.
Yeah, that, and honestly, let's talk about that for a second, because there isn't, outside of like when he says ski season,
Yep.
there isn't
Ski,
like
snowboarding.
yeah, but but there really isn't even a better day necessarily anymore. It used to be that if you go up on the weekends, it was gonna be packed. Anymore, people are skiing throughout the week as well. So the ski season is literally from the time we have snow until we don't, and it is pretty packed. It's actually part of the reason we kind of stopped going, not only kids, but also just it became quite a task. So adding that extra drive from say Aurora is going to make it that much more inconvenient.
Another thing when we're talking about the proximity is essentially if you are in like the southern portion, or even I'd say the eastern portion of Aurora, the best way to get to the airport is the tollway. The only like easy, convenient way to get there on a public road is if you're on the north side of Aurora and you're right off of I-70, then you can just shoot right over. But outside of that, you're pretty much gonna be taking the toll because 225 is always crazy backed up.
Yes.
And so it's like, all right, I'm just gonna hop on this toll. Yes, it's a little bit pricey, but it takes you directly to.
So if you are trying to take some of the main roads and trying to avoid the toll, because the toll kind of cuts all of this off, when 270 coming from north merges with I-70, believe it or not, that backs up that I-70 area, which also is coming from 225. So that area right there where all three of them are coming together, if you take the toll, you get beyond that part when you're going towards the airport. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with one of those three highways, and they typically will back up because they all run into each other.
Another characteristic we're going to talk about Aurora is just how flat it is. People want to come to Colorado. There's actually been a lot of you that have been talking to me like, hey, I want some hills. I kind of want to see the mountains right there. Aurora is pretty much as flat as you can get in regards to one of the largest cities in Colorado.
The second thing that we do not like about Aurora, which we touched a little bit on in the last one, but the big thing about Aurora is it's kind of got like this traffic shroud.
Yeah, it seems like no matter where you are at in Aurora, it's constantly traffic. Unless, of course, you're on the east side where you are closer to 470, where a lot of those people do take the highway. But 225 is always crazy backed up. You got I-70 on the north side. That seems like that's always backed up. Even if you're like on the outside of like on I-25, that gets backed up. And so Aurora is just surrounded by all these crazy backed up highways. And it makes it pretty intense when you're sitting there trying to get home or commute to work or anything like that. It's like, God, I cannot stand this freaking traffic.
The other thing too that I was just thinking about when you were saying that is not just the highway traffic. If you start to go kind of west to Aurora, you start getting into Denver and you start getting into those smaller roads that feel like it's just really narrow. We've got street parking with some of the kind of neighborhoods that are a little bit more Victorian style right there. And you start to feel like your world shrink a little bit. That was one thing I actually hated driving from Denver to Aurora on the back roads, is like just really narrow roads that make it feel like traffic. I mean, if somebody has to pass in some of these roads, I mean, sometimes you are literally pulling over for someone else to pass if you're traveling through some of those west side of the neighborhoods. So that's another thing, is just feeling like even if you're away from the highway, you're still going to have that inner city traffic because it really merges from Denver.
The third thing that we really don't like about Aurora, Colorado is pretty much how old the housing is in Aurora. Now, I know that there's so many of you who probably live in Aurora or know Aurora, like, no, what are you talking about? There's Aurora Highlands, there's the Gun Club Road out there, all that's brand new and stuff like that. If we are talking about the heart of Aurora, it is pretty old, and so you have a lot of these older homes with that also older infrastructure and all that stuff, so that's where you kind of do get those backups with the traffic. But yes, there is ways to get away from that. There are these newer areas, but at the same time, there is a lot of older housing in Aurora.
Yeah, and we talk about those newer housing, which I know if you're living in Aurora and you bought one of those brand new housing complexes, you're like, what? Like, it's beautiful, it's brand new. We get that. The east side of Aurora is all new. We think that they're trying to kind of appeal to the Gaylord and all of that, going towards DIA and all of that. However, another thing about Aurora is that the more affordable housing is going to be in the older part of Aurora, and there's going to be more housing options unless you're going to be paying a pretty penny, say on that south or east side of Aurora.
There is this like surrounding area to Anschutz where it's kind of becoming like a bougie area because Anschutz is a medical campus, so you have all these doctors, nurses, different medical practices over there, and they're like, you know what, I want to be in this area, so they're kind of renovating the area a little bit. You got Central Park, which is just straight west of there, so that is also an area that a lot of these medical professionals are living in. So you kind of have that, and so there are these kind of pockets of Aurora where they're kind of popular, right? Or even like the Cherry Creek school system portion of Aurora. So you have those popular portions of Aurora. Outside of that, it's just, the housing is kind of spotty.
Yeah, especially because it's so big. I feel like majority of the housing is still in the older portion.
Yeah.
And that is a perfect segue into the fourth thing that we do not like about Aurora, and that is the large landmass.
Yeah, so the thing about Aurora is if we look at the landmass of all the different cities in Colorado, Aurora is actually ranked only second behind Colorado Springs, which is #1 landmass.
Which is crazy. That's
huge. It's huge. It's massive. If we're talking about populations, it's actually the third most populated city within Colorado, with I believe it's Denver, Colorado Springs, then Aurora comes in third. Looking at 393,000, almost 400,000 people living within Aurora. So that's crazy. It's a super large city. And if you're trying to get from one end of the city to the other end of the city, it does take you a while, especially when you do put into perspective the traffic that you're going to deal with.
Now let's talk a little bit about that big city for a second and like this large landmass. This also kind of feeds into your school options for any of the families out there. This is also something that we don't particularly love is, the public school as an overall rating in Aurora is going to be relatively low. Now, again, I hate to say this, but as the newer complexes come in, we start to see new schools get put in, and we do start to see that score kind of get averaged out. But because it's such a large area, when somebody comes to me, like any of you got clients who are looking in this area, I hate to be like, hey, don't look at the overall score of Aurora. We have a highly concentrated school system in the old part of Aurora, but we also have schools out on the outside of Aurora that are going to affect that score. So if you haven't actually seen how I do that with you guys, I don't just lean heavily on just the Aurora school overall. You got to click on the map when you're in the district, and you need to really zoom into the different schools that are there, because we are starting to see that change a little bit. But that is something that we've never really liked about Aurora.
All right, the fifth thing that we're going to be covering that we don't like about Aurora, and this is actually not necessarily about Aurora as a city, it's more about what the people think about Aurora, and it does have a stigma. If you're talking to locals or natives who have been in Colorado for a while, Aurora's kind of always had the stigma like, you live in Aurora?
It's got a thing.
It does have a thing.
The thing is that Aurora has changed, and that's the positive of this one. The hard thing is it's still not going to kick that from the local perspective, or like not even locals, it's natives, it's people who grew up in Colorado. Aurora wasn't always the most desirable city to live in, and it always had this. It's not just Aurora, right? Like Commerce City. Commerce City also has a new part of it that people highly desire.
Reunion.
Reunion. But Commerce City, it's the name. Like, Reunion doesn't even want to call themselves Commerce City. If that tells you anything. And I think that's why a lot of these like newer areas in Aurora as well are taking on kind of their community names and stuff. They don't say, oh, I live in Aurora anymore. They're like, oh, I live in, blah, blah, blah neighborhood. And
Southlands.
Because there's a stigma. Thornton, we live in Thornton.
Thornton definitely always had a stigma, especially when we were growing up. We're like, oh, you live up in Thornton?
Like,
I mean,
Thornton?
I had that stigma of growing up, and now I'm like, I live in North Thornton. And you still have some natives who are like, oh, you live in Thornton? It's like,
you have to like tell them, like, oh, we're in this part of Thornton. And like, that's silly. It's silly because Thornton also has a new area. So this is the stigma we talk about, where I just don't know if Aurora's ever going to kick it. And even though we shouldn't care what other people think, it's interesting to know that people are like, oh, like you see it when you're talking about it, don't you think?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
And that might be, obviously that's pretty opinion driven, but guys, it's real. And like, you don't know it if you're moving into, I mean, even no matter where you buy in a different state, when you move into a state, you start to learn what like the locals or the natives who have been there, the different areas that you would never know if you weren't from there. All right, that was down and dirty. We gave you 5 things that we do not like about Aurora, all the way down to kind of the stigma and all of that. But if you guys are liking this content, you want to follow along, maybe you're not ready to buy yet, no worries. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up if you like that video, and also hit the notification bell so you are notified every single time that we put out a new video.
And of course, guys, if you are looking at purchasing real estate here in the beautiful state of Colorado, we've got a team of licensed real estate agents to help you guys out. Why don't you give us a phone call or text the phone number right below. Right below right there, we always answer. It doesn't matter date or time. And until next time, we love you. Bye.
Bye.
Cities in Colorado. You say it?
Nope.
Okay.